So now that we understand the general layout and we understand how to specify where to draw whatever elements we want to draw in, let's look at specifically the first one, the layout. So under layout, we can see that in our main function create UI, we have specified a layout tab, and then we have specified here to show layout in this layout tab. So let's look at that function and understand how that works. And I'm just going to increase the space here. And so the first thing we'll want to do is create a shortcut to that name viewport. So we pull up from settings, we pull out the attribute viewport, and now we have viewport as a variable. So var viewport, that gives us a handle to viewport. And then the first thing we want to do here is create this thing arb title, and we'll use the lorem ipsum text. So you can see here arb title and the text in there. So to add some text into a viewport, you create a new container, and so you'll see here viewport.add. So viewport.add is going to expect 3 arguments, and we'll see there are modifications of that, but right now let's just say there are 3 arguments. The first argument is an ID slug. So we provide a name to this new container, and we want to provide a name because later on we might want to reference that, and we might want to add things into this new container. So we always start out providing a name to the container, and then we specify a type. So AUE div, that's a container. We are saying that this is just a division of the page, and then we specify all the parameters for this element. So we specify the script, and then in the script you can see here we are using, if you know your HTML, we are using H3, that means heading level 3, and we are specifying arb title. So you can see here there's arb title as a heading, and then if we look further, then outside of the heading we've got this text in here. So you can see that's rendered as we expect. So fine, this is just text, but it is all wrapped into a container here, arb, and so that's an active object. And now because we've said arb text equals this, we can do things later on to this arb text if we want. We can do things like change the text in here, or we can add other objects into here. So that's why we do it this way. We have to give it a name, and we have to capture that as an object. So if we don't want to do anything else with that in the future, you don't have to capture it. But anyway, that's done here. So now the next thing we want to do is we are adding again to the viewport. And the way to think about this is as a tree. So you can think of there being an underlying tree to this. So viewport is kind of the root of this tree. So we've added one object to the root, and now we are adding a second object into this root. So the second object is called grid, and it's no longer an AUE div, now it's an AUE grid, and this grid is using the template LM, that means left and mid. So it's not really mid because it actually occupies all the space. So it's a left, there's a left panel, and there's another section. So there's a left panel here, and don't worry about what's in there, but it's just creating an invisible left part and another part. So when we use the template LM, it's going to create a left panel that can be referenced by the keyword left, and it creates another larger panel to the right of that panel, which we'll reference with mid. And you can see that down here. We've created grid now, right? We've added grid, we've named it grid. You could name it whatever you like here. All these names are up to us to specify. So we've created grid, and we've captured it with grid here. We've created a variable which is a reference to this grid. And now we are using the function call. So you see, when we create a grid, it's understood that it's going to create a bunch of columns for us. And now because we've used the template LM, there's going to exist a column called left. So we say grid.col left, and then into this left column we are going to create some text. So you can see here AUE div, so we're just adding some text here called accordion set, and we are doing that with this heading, third level heading. So accordion set, and you can see that right here. So you've added accordion set into this left column, and then we are going ahead and we are adding now into this left section again. So the left section, first of all, we added this title accordion set, and now we are adding yet another type of object, AUE tabs. So we've just given it the arb ID slug AC, and we are specifying it's of type AUE tabs, and then here we are specifying the attributes of AUE tabs. So the tab type, first of all, is accordion, and you can see here this is an accordion type of a thing, right? So when you click around here, you can see it's this accordion style of operation. So we've specified the tab type is accordion, and we are specifying the tabs. So you can see 3 tabs as we expect here. We can see there are 3 tabs, and for the first tab here, so for the first tab I'm providing a label, and for these other ones you can see I'm not providing a label. So for this label I'm providing an icon and a more specific name, and so you can see that the icon and the specific name. For the others, I didn't provide a label, so what the system will do is because it can't find a label, it will just go ahead and use the attribute name. So you can see that here, tab 2 and tab 3. So that's an accordion. So we've created an accordion now. Now what we want to do, you can see, is add a form in here. And so forms are important to understand well, because that's your primary means of interacting with the user. So the user can pass values to you and so on through forms. So we want to add a form into this accordion space right here. Right, so we've specified these 3 tabs, and we've specified labels, and in some cases we didn't specify labels, and so we've got this accordion available, and now we want to add a form in there. So this is how we add a form into our space, and note that we want to put it into tab 1, which is out of UE tabs. Now we've got this reference here, AC, so we are pointing at that accordion, and we want to reference tab 1, and you can see here we just use ac.tab1, tab 1, so we have to look up the tab, which is named tab 1, right, with the attribute name. So this is a reference to that, and we are saying that we are going to add into that first tab AUE form. And so I hope you can see the pattern by now. You can see that our style of adding things, of introducing new elements, is to think about the space in which we want to draw the element, and then we say add, so we specify the reference to the space, and then we say dot add, and then we specify the type of thing we want to put in there, and we give it a short name, and then we specify all the attributes of that thing. So the third argument, that's where it's a JSON object, and you can see through all these attributes we are able to get the object to behave the way that we want it to. So in this case we are adding a form into here, and so in this form we can see a bunch of fields, so 3 fields, and we could name them anything. You can see you can provide any attribute name that you like here, and we've just specified field 1, field 2, field 3, and then in the first one it's just text, so we just give a label here. Field 1 is just text, and you can see that here field 1 is text, and then for field 2 we want to create a selector now, And so the selector, it's a drop selector, so you might have a couple of options you want to specify. So for the selector, we have to specify here type. So again, you can see that we didn't specify a type for the first one, so it just assumed it was a text input form element. So that's another thing to notice, that when we create our elements and we use these functions, a lot of these functions are made for ease of use. And so there are many defaults that are introduced, and so if you don't specify an attribute, then the system will assume something and try to carry on as best it can. So here we didn't specify a type, just like we didn't specify a label here and so on. So we didn't specify a type here, so it just assumed it was a text input. Here we didn't specify, well, here we've specified it's of type select, so then it knows that there will be some options we want to include. So we include the options, and here you can see we give a label and we give an attribute. So if we choose option 1, then the value behind this will be opt1. If we choose option 2, then it's opt2. So that's the way to read that. Here's another type, date time, and you can see here you get this icon, and if you click on that, you can choose a date and you can specify a time of day and so on. So that's the date time type. There are several other types. There's password, there's static, and so on. So you can introduce quite a lot of elements here. So you can read the documentation to look at the other types of elements available for a form. So those are just the fields of the form, and then of course to take some action you need to create some buttons down here, and so all of this was done in the fields attribute space. By the way, if you specify true, simple is true, then that just improves the look of this form. So here we also specify a buttons part, and you can have as many buttons as you like. Here also as many fields as you like. There's no restriction on the number of fields to include here. So under buttons now, we've just got one button here, show vals. And then again, you can create a customized label there, and you can see we've used an icon as well. And then the important bit here is callback. So this callback tells the button what to do when it's pressed. So callback, and then your function is specified here. So what this will do, first of all, it will send in all the values in that form into this function, and then here what we decided to do was just alert out to the screen, select val, and then from vals it's going to look up the field 2 value. So field 2 is the selector, and then we can see it's going to be one of these options. So whatever was selected is going to be alerted to the screen. So that's the action that's going to happen when we click on show vals. So let's try that. If we click here, you can see it says opt2. Right, so if we change that to option 1, then you can see opt1. Right, so that's how you work with forms. You create your fields, you create your buttons, you specify a function that will take action when that button is clicked, and then that's everything. Those are the basics of operating with these forms. Now let's move on to the next section. So here under tab 2, well, there's nothing really exciting here. We are simply demonstrating that we can add into the space. So remember, we added the form under tab 1, which was in this AC. Now we are going back to that accordion, and we are looking in tab 2, and this time we are just adding some text here. And you can see now that there is a bit of shorthand. This time I'm not using 3 arguments. There are actually just 2 arguments in this call to add. So I always have to specify a name, but now instead of specifying AUE div, I'm just going straight into specifying the attributes, which is script. And again, that's where the code is written such that it will always, if it doesn't find the the specification it's looking for, then it will try and assume something. So here we haven't specified the time. You see the type. You see in all these other ones we've specified the type of object, right? So if we don't specify the type of object, it will assume that it's AUE div. So it's just going to try and create some text now, and so that text is our lorem ipsum type text. So you can see it's assumed it's text, and it's put in that script over there. So that's in tab 2. And then of course there's nothing in tab 3, and yeah, we've simply neglected to put anything into tab 3, and so that's what we have there. Okay, now the next thing we are doing, right, so we are done with this left panel here. Now we want to add things into this right panel, and let's just see what's happening here. So section 1, we can see this stuff here, and then there's something down here. So if we click on this, we can see that what we actually want is just to control this space right here. So we aren't trying to control what's down here. So we want to create a subsection where we are just we are able to specify what's inserted into the space here. So to do that, first of all, we are wanting to do this on the right hand side of the page. So here we do that, so we specify grid.colMid. So remember, we used the template LM. So when we created that grid, it was LM, and now we've called up the mid part, and we are adding into that, and now we are adding it's AUE tabs, right? We saw AUE tabs just now when we were creating the accordion, but now instead of an accordion type, we want a type of tabs here. So in the tab type, we specified tabs instead of accordion. And now under the tabs, you can see the 3 tabs, tab 1, tab 2, tab 3, and you could name these whatever you wanted to instead. And then we specify some labels for those tabs. So you've created these tabs here. So we've created 3 tabs. And let's add some things into this. And so in the same style as before, we've created a reference to these tabs. So tabs 2, and then if we want a specific tab out of that, then we specify tab and the name of the tab. So let's say we want to add into section 1. Here we just want to add some text. And you can see that the text here, so the text has been added into into that section 1 tab. And in this, you can see a couple of other attributes. So CSS class. So there are some built-in classes, and in fact this is all based off Bootstrap. So Bootstrap uses it defines a lot of useful classes. So P3 means add some padding, because we don't want this text to be right up against the edge, right? We want a nice little border here. So that's what this P3 is. And then we also want to control the colors. So Bootstrap doesn't give us too many color options, and quite often we want to customize the colors. So instead we say CSS style. So that's obviously a reference to the cascading style sheets. So you can specify your style options here. And if you want to add more styling, you just use a semicolon, and then you provide another attribute name and some other value there. So anyway, so we can control the look and feel of that text, and there's the actual text. So we've added an element in there. And then what are we doing here? Then if you look at what we want to do here, right, so this first one was pretty straightforward, just add some text in. Here now it's a bit more complex. We want to create a 2-column layout, and so you can imagine we need a grid here, and then you can see some special styling here as well. So we create another grid, and of course be careful not to overwrite your other grids, right? You already have a grid, and in fact this grid is nested inside that outer grid. So now we are creating another grid, and so we give it some new names, and we specify we are adding that into the second tab. So of course tabs 2, right, it's not these tabs, it's tabs 2 is in here. So in this tab we are creating a grid, a 2-column grid, and in this grid we use LR, so we use the template LR. So by the way, there's LM, there's LMR, and there's LR. So if it's LR, then it's left and right, so equally sized columns, and there'll be a left and a right. So we look up grid 2 and we say column dot left, and then we can add in some text here. So we add the same lorem ipsum here on this side. So on the leftmost one, we are adding the text, and here again we add some padding, and now we specify a color here. And if you read these colors, you'll see that it looks like this. So we're using a color here around this text, and then we are adding another. So on the right, so that was on the left. On the right, we are adding the same text, and now we want different colors here. So we specify that for the background color, and then when you run this, you realize this background color is a bit dark, and you want to change the foreground color. So that's what we have here. We've got the background color, and then, as I said before, in CSS style, you use a semicolon, and you by changing the color attribute, you can change the text color. Right, so that's how we've added another grid there. And then let's go a bit further. Now you can see we want some cards down here, and we don't want this inside of these inside of these tabs. We want these cards to always be visible on this side of the page. So we would add these cards directly to grid mid, right? So remember, we created the overall grid here, the overall, so it's not, we don't want to add it into grid 2, we want to add it into the outer grid, which is just grid. And so to grid, we in the column called mid, right, and mid was created automatically when we used template LM. We are creating a row. And this is how you create a row. You simply create an AUE div. So AUE div is not just for showing text, it's also for helping with your layout. And you specify a row. So in your CSS class, you add in a CSS class attribute, and you use a row. And then I'm also using this class here, MT3, and that tells you margin top 3. So the reason for that is I don't want these cards to be right up against the bottom edge of these things. I want a nice little space here. So I'm just doing that with a margin. So you can see here that there are all these classes that you need to be familiar with, and you can easily learn about these on the Bootstrap page. So go to Bootstrap and go to their grid layout, and you can see all the options that are available. So anyway, we've created a row space. So by specifying row here, you see we don't want these cards to be one underneath the other. We want those to be on a row side by side here. And you could do that with the grid, right? So a grid does that, but this is just showing an alternative now. So if we don't want to use a grid, if we just want things to stack up horizontally, you can do that using CSS class being a row here. So we've created a row, and by the way, card row is nothing special. It doesn't mean we have to add cards in. That's just the name we chose to give it. So anyway, card row, we are adding into this card row, and now you can see here we've got 2 adds, one after the other. So you are allowed to do that in this code, right? You can add. We want to specify the size of this. You'll find that card, if we just specify the, well, let me start again. Let me explain first what this means. So this class is the column size. It's the width of that space that we are going to use. And you see, if you read up on your grid layouts in Bootstrap, It's all based on a column size of 12. So I guess they use 12 because 12 has many divisors. Because you can go your column 12, you can split that up into two columns of 6 and 6. And you can see here in our column, you can see two cards here. I've got col 6 here and col 6 there. So that adds up to 12. Or you can go 4 times 3, or you can go 3 times 4, or 2 times 6, or 1 times 12, and of course you could use this one could be col 4 and that could be col 8, or so it must just add up to 12. So basically you can control the width like this. And ideally this would be integrated into the card, but that doesn't actually work, so we have to add a little space to be explicit that we want this card to fit into col 6. So we add that space, so a container for the card container 1, and then we add the card itself. So this is yet another type of object, so AUE card, and then we give it a little name, and then we give it the attributes. And you can see in these attributes there's an image, there's a title, and there's a body. And if we look here, you can see there's an image, there's a title, and there's a body. So there's the main parts of the card. And then we can also add buttons to it. So if you want to add functional buttons, so here you can see there's say hi, so it will alert hi, and then how are you, and you can see you can specify the labels, and then that will give you that text. So if we click say hi, if we click on how are you, then yeah, how are you, and so on. So that's your card. And then we add the second card here, so you can see card 2 we are adding into the same card row, and yeah, that's pretty much as we expect, right? And that's pretty much it. With those simple elements, right, with grids and accordions and tabs, and yeah, just by understanding something about the bootstrap styling, you can create quite a lot of layout options. So you would go ahead and label your spaces well, use the icons. So you by the way, you would go over to icons here and do that. But anyway, this is how you can create your layout. This is how you can control your space. And by default, this is all responsive. So if you are viewing on other types of devices, you can see everything goes into this to this kind of responsive look. So so that's how you control your layout in this template.